French Racing Cuda. What the hell does that mean? A few years ago, we had an associate of ours contact us over in Europe. And every so often, we have a counterpart of good friend relations overseas. If they come across a car that's got a great story, they call us first. And one day, we got a phone call from one of our counterparts over there and said, listen, I've got a real American car for you, you know, like heavy French accent. Okay, great, yeah, so I guess it'll be right up our alley because we're American guys, you know, thanks, Romeric. And it was a Hemi Cuda, but this Hemi Cuda was in a barn, like most of these crazy cars that have epic stories are. It was stuffed in a barn that was in the hillside of France, in an area known as kind of like gypsy occupied location. And it was the gypsy Hemi Cuda. It was like eggshell white. It had these big center lock BBS gold basket wheels on it. 1970 Hemi Cuda. For those that don't know, the Hemi Cuda out of the 1970s, early 70s is like the pinnacle of all muscle cars. So this very iconic car was over in France. And it's not typical that you have a very iconic American car over in France. Did a little more research with our associate, and he said, you know what, I think this might actually be the French Racing Cuda. The French Racing Cuda, what the hell does that mean? The Chrysler X-Works race car that Chrysler had owned and shipped over to Europe for their attempt at European racing. Now, for those that don't know, European racing in its entirety is much larger than our racing over in the United States. And this car was supposedly in or around France at that time and going to these events. More than not, it was a Porsche or Renault or a Peugeot or a BMW, something that raced in these hillside events that were successful. The small cars, the narrow roads, the hill climbs, power to weight ratio, not this big, burly, nasty, you know, big block American muscle car. So we start doing some more research and we find out it won four Group A championships. It won got 68 podium finishes. Said, all right, well, I guess it's time to pitch it to a client. This is one of these great investment moments. So I pitched it to a client and said that, hey, listen, this is the Chrysler X-Works Hemi Cuda. People are like, okay, yeah, well, what does that mean? You tell them a little more about the car. And you're like, hey, listen, yeah, Chrysler used to own this damn bad boy. They sent it overseas and they raced it for, I believe it was 200 and something races. It was killing it over there. We put more pieces to the puzzle. The original race car driver was still alive and he was doing well. He was noted as the Carroll Shelby of France. Henri Chemin, everyone over there knew him. He was like Mr. Mustang, he was Mr. Hemi Cuda. Him and Carroll Shelby were actually really good friends. He drove this car everywhere, from the racetrack to the supermarket. This was his daily car. Like, no one else could get behind the wheel of this automobile but him. So the car was shipped back over after we'd done a lot more due diligence on the history, and the owner of the car was so psyched about it. However, we're just hearing bits and pieces of the story. We don't know if it's for certain if this is the car. It's got different wheels on it. It's got a different paint scheme on the vehicle. It's now an eggshell white. It never raced in this color. It was supposed to have some big elaborate livery on the car, and it was raced and sponsored by CB and Shell gasoline at one time, and nothing what it resembled currently. As the documentation had started, the actual build of the car, the hands-on aspect, there were some cameras and there were some guys that worked for Speed Vision at that time, and also another station, Velocity. The gentleman behind the camera was that of Bill Stevens. He's there behind the camera and he's kind of doing a little commentary and he's like, hey, listen, you know, I guess we just gonna start buzzing this thing down. We got a call from Henri. We asked him some questions. He told us exactly how the car was in its winningest livery, its most winningest colors. It was supposed to be white and blue, and then they painted it red and white at one time. If we don't find any of these colors underneath it, it's going to make it much more harder for me to prove this to a client. Stripping the car down, and on camera, there's the red and the white. We're like, holy shit, it is the race car. You've got to be kidding me. And this car had been off the radar for the better part of 30 to 40 years. No one had seen or known its whereabouts. Everyone was looking for it. We decided to do a full-blown restoration on it, every single nut and bolt off. We go through the entire process, document every single step all the way through. From the restoration of the engine, the paint work, the new color scheme. We're talking to the old race car driver overseas. He's telling us exactly what bolts have to go where. The seat belts that he had at that time and how the steering ratio was in the box and the feel that he had, right down to small things like stickers on the door jamb that said export by Chrysler France. Now it comes time to reunite the Hemi Cuda with the original race car driver. He hadn't seen the car in quite some time after the Gypsy Camp had owned it and painted and done its own thing. I greet him at the front door, him and his wife. He walks through the shop. I've got a car cover over the vehicle. Bill Stevens is over there from Velocity. We got a couple cameras rolling. This is going to be epic. Pull the cover off, and sure enough, he almost fell over backwards. He was floored. The car was done exactly the way that he remembers it, like down to the T. He goes over to the driver's side and checks the door handle, and on camera, and it was like, you know, this was the real first reaction of him seeing the car. He goes to pull the handle, and the car was locked. I didn't even know how the car locked. I don't even think the thing had strikers inside the door. It was a race car at that time. I think they were probably deleted. And it was locked. We're like, you gotta be kidding me. So, cut the camera, go back to the car, got the door to open. He gets in the car, does a little song, dance, speech, everything. He starts crying, he signs the dashboard, he's psyched. We're happy, we won. The owner's happy. The ex owner, race car driver's happy. This is beyond a win-win situation, much more than we could ever predict. A couple months later, they want to finish up all of the videography work and the right story on the car. They said, well, we've got to ship the car over to Europe and race it at one of the old tracks where he was known for hammering at the corners and one of the circuit events, because the car had to excel very well on track as well as off track hill climb. So we get over to Paul Ricard, and it's 25,000 euro to rent the track for the day. We do the garage setup, we take the photographs, everything's hunky-dory. He goes to get behind the wheel. We find out his license is expired, his racing license. So we're like, f it. Everyone there at the track knows he's like a hero, he's an icon. They just let it slide. He goes to put the seat forward, it stops. Like, okay, yeah, well, it's all the way forward. What's wrong? The guy had shrunk about half a foot over the last 40 years, and his feet didn't reach the pedal anymore. So we had to build a wooden block setup underneath his foot, tie it and tape it to his feet so we can get out on the racetrack. Mind you, we just finished this car. We've got probably 2,500 hours of blood, sweat, tears, research, development. And here we are about to just throw the keys to this old guy that's in his 80s to go blasting wide open around this racetrack. Why not? I was too short. We made the block. He got in the car. And he's taking a couple parade laps. Everything's going well. And then he really starts opening up the throttle. And he's coming down the stretch. He's doing 120, 130, 140. We're all looking at each other like, oh my God, we've got to make it to the Greenwich Concourse next month. This thing better not hit the rail. Thankfully enough, he didn't. He actually drove phenomenally well for his age and being his license expired. It was definitely a white knuckle adventure at the racetrack, watching a car that you put your heart and soul into. It'd be like you building your Supra, your GTR, your Corvette, and handing the keys to your grandmother to go around a racetrack at full throttle. I mean, the experience was epic. It was an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. We all made it out alive. It was definitely an epic story, to say the least.
Last year, Sonny and I tried out Avalon King's Armor Shield 9 ceramic coating on my Porsche 993, and it came out great, and since then it's been much easier to keep clean. You can see the story about that here, but more importantly, this month we're going to try it out on my LP640. The car's finally done being repainted, and right now AP3 is putting a clear bra on the whole car, and on top of that, we're going to put the ceramic coating to make it look better and easier to clean. So if you'd like to try that out on your car, you can click the link in the description below.